This is awkward. I just went to edit the video together and I realized that when I hit space to go to the next slide, I was still tabbed into OBS, which stopped the recording. So I'm now going back and doing fire. The rest of the video is already done. And I'm now having to do the intro and fire again. So, welcome to episode 4, Offensive Types. Um, as I've said before that you don't know, we can finally finish the type series and move on to more important things like team building and roles, which I've already started working on, and now I'm coming back to go do this. But anyways, for offensive types, in hindsight, ground and dragon probably should have been over here and good at both, but I wanted to put emphasis on their offensive prowess. And also, you should just be taking this whole diagram thing with a grain of salt anyways, because everything really is mon specific. But to get into fire for the second/third time, unique mechanics, fire mons cannot be burned, which is huge because if you didn't know, fire type, not fire types, when you get burned, your attack stat is halved. Not your special attack, just your attack. So if you have a physical attacking mon that gets burned, it's now essentially dead in the water, unless you're boosting up to like 4x. But is a death sentence for physical attackers, so the fact that fire cannot be burned from Will-O-Wisp is huge. On top of this, we have Sun, which now in Gen 9 does everything in the game. So we have a 50% fire boost, and that's a boost to fire type moves. 50% nerf to water type moves in terms of power. We also are activating chlorophyll, harvest, growth, and any other things that activate in the sun. And now with Gen 9, we are activating photosynthesis, which snaps the game in half. Because now, when we're running sun teams, which were mostly fire and grass Pokemon, now we have a whole slew of photosynthesis mons to choose from that can take advantage of this as well. So, Sun is now stupidly good. The general trends for fire types is that they have high attack and / or high special attack with mid defensive stats. And they're not completely glass cannons like Ghost type is, but they tend to be rather frail. Mostly in like the getting two-shotted territory. Now, obviously, some of these are case dependent. Mons like Charizard, Volcarona, Iron Moth have decent enough special defense that they can take a hit or two if they're getting hit special defensively. If Volcarona is quiver dancing and going first against a special attacker, it could actually just win the game off that. It has enough special defense there that when boosted with quiver dance, you're looking at just straight up ending the game. That's why Volcarona is so good. But in terms of defensive Pokemon, the main ones are really going to be Moltres and Heatran because of their abilities. Each have Flame Body, and Heatran also has Flash Fire. So with Moltres, you can really just go max HP, max defense. If they have a physical attacker, you switch Moltres in. They make contact with you, 30% chance to burn them, and essentially make them dead in the water. Which is huge, great defensive Pokemon, and this wasn't even an option until the introduction of heavy duty boots. So Moltres kind of came from the cellar straight to OU once they added heavy duty boots, which I think is pretty cool. Seeing this mon actually get usage and seeing fire and flying types actually stand a chance now defensively. But that brings us to one of our main points. is fire is kind of boots or bust. So Moltres, you're going to have boots. You're not going to have leftovers. If we're looking at other fire type Pokemon, like say Char Y or Char X, you have your stone. You can't have boots. You're going to take 50% from hazards. If you're Volcarona, back in my day, you could run Z move. You could run, lefties, whatever. Now you're just strapped into boots. It's really all you're going to run. And if you're not running them, say you're running, Specs Iron Moth or Booster Energy Iron Moth, you're going to get chunked for a quarter of your HP with rocks. If you're running Choice Blacephalon or Choice Victini, which are two great Choice Lock users, you're going to be getting chunked. You're going to want to make sure you have adequate hazard removal on your team to support your Firemon so they're not getting blasted every time they come into the game. Type chart-wise, fire is the most common hidden power type along with ice because it hits steel. I gotta load up my Gen 9 type chart again. Do this all over again. Fire is super effective against grass, ice, bug, and steel, which is great because you're hitting grass and steel, two good defensive types. But you are being resisted by fire, water, rock, and dragon. Water, obviously not ideal. Dragon, not ideal. But it is enough here that fire is going to be one of the most common coverage type moves. As you'll see on Psychic and Fairy, a lot of them are running Mystical Fire solely just to hit steel. Because, as you'll see later in the video, fighting doesn't have any special attack options other than Focus Miss, which people would just much rather run Mystical Fire than Focus Miss the majority of the time. And Ground has Earth Power, but that's not readily available for a lot of these types. So a lot of these types are going to end up using Mystical Fire or just HP Fire. When I was talking about water, I mentioned that water had Hydro Pump, Surf, and Scald, and they had basically a full repertoire of moves that they could use to use the exact one they need for that circumstance. Fire is the other type that is capable of doing that. And what I mean is it has a ridiculous amount of fire moves to choose from that are all good and viable in their own way. So just looking at Chi-Yu, if you want 100% accuracy, don't have to worry about missing, you have Flamethrower. 90 power, extremely solid move. If you want a little more power, a little less accuracy, you have Fire Blast. If you want to go kind of all in on a one-shot with max power, but drawback, you have Overheat. And on top of this, there's even more fire-type moves that you could choose from in terms of kind of like Mon-specific stuff, kind of like Mind Blown, V-Create, stuff like that. We have Mystical Fire for coverage or to reduce their special attack if you're doing something with that. There's unique moves like Torch Song, Searing Shot, Sacred Fire, Mind Blown. The list goes on and on. Magma Storm for trapping, if you have access to that. Eruption for 150 power, if you're going first. More unique moves like Blue Flare, Bitter Blade. The list goes on. And those are, not all of them I just listed, but the ones up here I'm talking about are just special attack. So just from a special attack standpoint, we have every single option to choose from. We have the high power move, that with drawback, the high power move with a little less accuracy, the safe move, and then Lava Plume, 30% chance to burn. That's essentially our Scald. So quite literally every single archetype of move you could ask for, especially, is on Chi-Yu alone. When it comes to physical, the repertoire is not as good. So this is kind of where we get into frustration territory, because the main moves you're going to see on everyone is really Flare Blitz and Fire Punch. Fire Punch is only 75 power. That's not ideal. That's like if you're using it for coverage, not really what we want. Flame Charge, you get the speed boost, but it's only 50 power. It's kind of a stat raising move. Flare Blitz, there's the 120 power, but we have recoil. And then Blaze Kick is on Blaziken, but it's not on a ton of Pokemon. It's better, but 85 power for 90% accuracy isn't exactly perfect. It's not ideal. So when we get into the physical side of things, we start struggling. And if we look at the Fire Mons at our disposal, we can see that Gouging Fire has a unique fire move that he can use. Groudon can take advantage of Heat Crash, as well as just having 180 attack. Ho-Oh has Sacred Fire, and Ogerpon has its Ivy Cudgel. So all the physical attackers, aside from Blaziken and Ubers, have a special, unique move to themselves that's allowing them to essentially pop off. Cinderace has Pyro Ball, which is why it's up here, and the rest of these are special attackers. So Suryaledge has Bitter Blade, a unique move to him. And then we have Blaziken, which is, relying on other stuff. And we get to our boy, Charex. Charex is the one that suffers from this conundrum the most, because if you're trying to sweep with him with Dragon Dance, you either go Flare Blitz and take out 2 to 3 bonds before killing yourself, or go Fire Punch and risk not getting the kill at all and dying. And I hate running Charex solely because of this. And it's a shame because I like the Mon, but it's extremely frustrating to play as. And Victini gets V-Create, so you're looking at 180 power, choice band, click the button. So physical attackers a lot of the times are relying on a unique move, while the special attackers have just a laundry list of stuff to choose from. Yeah. Even including what Justin does that we saw last season where he's running Weather Ball Charizard Y. It's just ridiculous arsenal that Fire has, especially. But when it comes to Fire, if you have something that can hit water, you're going to be doing very well for yourself, because that is really the main type that is countering you. So if you're something like Ogerpon Heart Flame that has Power Whip and Grass Stab and Horn Leech and everything, you're going to be doing good. Charizard Mega Y has Solar Beam. You're going to be doing good. Volcarona has access to Bug Buzz for Stab, or also Giga Drain to hit water directly. Suryaledge is clicking Stab Poltergeist. Doesn't get any better than that. Stab Close Combat. These are neutral against water, but they're extremely high-powered moves on high-powered Mons. So Iron Moth has Discharge. Blacephalon is 151 Spat with Beast Boost. Victini also has Bolt Strike. So if you are a Firemon and you are capable of hitting water, congratulations, you are viable. If not, in Ubers. So that should be it for Fire. And now I can finally go end the series, but for you guys, you're going on the ground. And on to ground type, where our unique mechanics are being immune to Sandstorm and also stuffing Volt Switch. Now, Volt Absorb and Lightning Rod can also stuff Volt Switch, but ground type is obviously the only type that can. And what I mean by that is, if you don't know what Volt Switch does, I really hope you do, because it's extremely good. You hit the enemy Pokemon with an electric move that's 70 power, and then you switch out. If you hit a ground type with Volt Switch, you don't switch out, and you don't do damage. So the main thing about it is that it's a pivot move, so you can get some damage in, get some chip damage in, and pop out, but that generates a ton of momentum for your team, but if it gets stuffed, you lose all that momentum. The Mon's still out on the field, and your entire plan has been completely thwarted, if that's a word. So Volt Switch is extremely powerful, and ground types being able to stop that in its tracks, or at least make your opponent stop using it and just hard switching, even if they have it, is extremely valuable. So having a ground type just in one of your 6 slots, great benefit for you, just as playing a mind game with your opponent around Volt Switch if they're running it. General trends are they are bulky, typically attack based, and they have some speed, but not a ton. And you can ignore the Ubers, but Clodsire is kind of unique, filling the special defense gap because a lot of ground types tend to be weak, especially. But Garchomp, high HP, high attack, 102 speed, good speed, but not elite speed. Elite speed is like 110 plus. Gliscor, similar thing. Great Tusk, the poster child for this. This is kind of exactly what I'm talking about, is Great Tusk stat line. A lot of these ground types just follow the same trend. Like Lando, same trend because it gets Intimidate, so it has more defense than you would expect. Iron Tread, same trend. Tinglu, same trend, but it's slow, but has a little more special defense and a ton of HP. So that's kind of what we're dealing with here. And there are some special attackers that do exist. There are some elite speed, like Zygarde 10%, hits the elite speed. We have some special attackers like Lando or Ursaluna Blood Moon. So the other ones do exist, but there are a lot of ground mons that follow the same kind of formula. But that bulk plus Earthquake makes great defensive mons because they are, a lot of them are defensive mons that also scare out Steel. So that is a huge plus for you. And ground type is super effective against 5 types and only resisted by 2 and immune by 1. So ground is super effective against fire, electric, poison, rock, and steel. I mean, rock, whatever. Fighting, is getting blown up by a lot of stuff. But it's electric's only weakness. And we're hitting poison and steel, which, as we talked about, are 2 of the most important defensive types. So this is where grass, flying, and bug come into play, and why these 3 types are kind of sought after defensively, because ground is destroying everything you love. It also hits water neutrally, but water is super effective against it. So water is an option against ground type if you are thick enough to live. And, just throw a Scald out at ground types. They really hate that for multiple reasons. But this is why flying, grass, and bug can be used defensively, and why you really should have one of those on your team, because you will get destroyed by a ground type if you do not have one of those. So, there's really nothing else to say. Earth Power and Earthquake are pretty much the only, real ground type moves you're going to be using, because Earthquake's 100 power, 100 accuracy. So what else are you ever going to want? The only situation where you're going to be using something else is, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name. I used him in KDL 1, Rillaboom. Grassy Surge and Grassy Terrain halves the damage of Earthquake. So to skirt around that, you can run high horsepower instead. And there's some other physical ground moves, because it's Grassy Surge. Earthquake's the main one. It also does, I believe, Magnitude and I think Bulldoze. But you can just run Stomping Tantrum or High Horsepower or some other ground move to skirt around it. So that's the only case where you're going to be using a physical ground move that's not Earthquake, unless you have something better like Headlong Rush, but only really Great Tusk and I think a few others get that. Yes, misclick. Wonderful. Okay, so a few. Why does Hariyama get Headlong Rush? What? Okay. But a lot of you are, gonna have access to this, so it's just gonna be Earthquake from there on out. In terms of special attack, Scorching Sands can be used defensively, which is new, and I like the move. I really wish it was on some more Mons, but it's really going to be Earth Power, and that is pretty much it. Yeah, and Sand Tomb for trapping, Scorching Sands for burning, and EP for special attack. And yeah, that's ground type. Just put your stat stick on the field and click your ground move and make your opponent respond. Congratulations. And for our last type that is super effective against steel, we have fighting. And fighting is super interesting because it is super effective against 5 types, but also resisted by 5, and 1 type is immune. So we're super effective against normal, which is normal's only super effective, which is huge. Ice, rock, dark, and steel. So normal, dark, and steel are huge. Rock, ice, are nice, but kind of whatever. But then we're resisted by poison, flying, psychic, bug, and fairy, which is really bad because poison, flying, fairy are 3 lovely defensive types, and you're going to throw bug in there as well, which we already know is useful, and you're giving psychic mons a chance, which you don't ever really want to do. So what's the meme here? Why is fighting still good offensively when you have this many key resistances? Well, it's because fighting moves hit like a freight train. So skipping some of this stuff, we'll just kind of get to the high-powered attack stab that results in a debuff section. And to show what I am talking about, I'm trying to find a mon that, has these moves the most so you can see. So, close combat, 120 power, but it's going to drop your defense and special defense. Superpower, 120 power, drops your attack defense. What else we got here? Focus Punch, 150 power, but if you get hit first, it's going to fail. And then if we drop down from this kind of, huge power, we have some safer, more consistent options like Brick Break, but 75 power, Dream Punch, but 75 power. Low Kick can be interesting and usable. And then we have some more utility with Mach Punch, Power Up Punch being 40 power. So the big one is close combat. That's the one you're going to see the most because it's dropping your defense and special defense. So if you're sweeping, you don't really care because you're not going to get hit anyways if you're outspeeding things. There's also some like dynamic punch can work if you have no guard. That's really nice. And I don't know why I didn't just type in fighting in the first place. Probably should have done that. Hammer Arm's another 100 power, but your speed's being lowered. And Circle Throw is cool. That's a utility move. Body Press is good for defensive Pokemon. High Jump Kick is another one, 130 power, 90 accuracy. And if you miss, you crash and hurt yourself for 50% of the damage. We have the 2 Sacred Sword, Secret Sword. And that's kind of it. So the point is that you have a lot of extremely high power moves with HJK, CC, Superpower, and you can tell these are very important moves to the meta when they all have abbreviations, like High Jump Kick, HJK, Close Combat, CC. A lot of fighting moves are kind of, the best offensive moves to use in the game because of their ridiculous power and accuracy. So That is kind of what defines this type. And when you have mons like this, that are hitting, almost, actually, won't say almost, over 400 power, choice banded, ripping a CC into your chin, a lot of these types, i.e. fairy, poison, flying, you can still get hit upwards of like 40% on some of these defensive mons. So if you're a flying type and you're at 100%, and for some reason you don't have boots, and you switch in to a banded CC, and you don't outspeed the next turn, you could just die. You'll take 25% from rocks, 40% from CC on switch in, and then 40% from CC again, and you're dead. So, despite having all the debuffs and resists and ghost immunity going against it, it's still a really good offensive type because the power is just so ridiculous. And some of these fighting type mons are just ridiculous in terms of stats, right? 190, 185, like I'm scrolled all the way up and I'm still seeing 130s in the attack column. That is ridiculous. So there is just an embarrassment of riches when it comes to high attack fighting Pokemon. When I have to scroll this far down and we got NFEs at base 100, that is just unlike any other type in the game. But we get special attack, not so much. Fully scrolled up, we're down to 90. We're down to Kabalion being a special attacker on our top screen. So there have been more good special attackers getting involved here in the newer gens. Mostly Iron Valiant and, Mewtwo Mega X, highest special attacker, but its main attack is 190. And even Lucario, its attack's higher. Formosa, equal. Blaziken, attack is still higher. So Keldeo's been really the only true fighting special attacker for a very long time now. And luckily, it gets Sacred Sword, or Secret Sword, sorry. So you don't have to use Focus Blast, which brings us to this. We don't care that we can't special attack because we don't have a move to special attack with. Secret Sword is basically unique to Keldeo, and even then it's only 85 power anyways, and hits physically as if it was an attacking move. So, great. Other than that, we have Aura Sphere, which is 80 power, and then we have Focus Blast. So Focus Blast is really the only high power special attack fighting move. And as you know, its nickname is Focus Miss because it has 70% accuracy. And when Hidden Power is banned, when we didn't have Mystical Fire, a lot of mons like Gardevoir and Psychic types, as we saw back in the Psychic video, on the front page, this meme, this is where that comes from. Where before we had Mystical Fire and stuff, a lot of Psychic types would be forced to run Focus Blast as just a chance to deal with Steel. And then you miss, you get blown up, you die, you lose the game. And it was hell on earth. So when it comes to fighting, unless you have Keldeo, you're going to be physical. I'm really hoping that changes in the future because it is annoying and it really kind of holds fighting back as a type. But as we can see in the unique mechanics, Game Freak hasn't really touched fighting type in like 10 years. Whenever Gen 5 was, which I guess is more like 15 years these days, when they added Keldeo, Kabalion, Virizion, and Terrakion, that was a ton for fighting type, and they really haven't been touched since. It's just kind of, they haven't changed. Defensively, the defensive options aren't particularly flattering. We have Bug, Rock, and Dark. Dark is really nice, but as we talked about with Dark, a lot of Dark types are spamming Knockoff, And we just established that we're going to be, choice banding a lot. So you don't want to get your choice band knocked off. So even though you can switch it on dark, because of the nature of knockoff, a lot of times you don't want to anyways. And when it comes to eating dark pulses, a lot of fighting types just don't have good special defense. They're more of like a defense type than a special defense. I mean, there's options here, but a lot of these are RUs and not mons you're really going to be using. So that's not ideal. Becomes a normal defense, a lot better options, and this is why they're more likely to eat stone edges than dark moves. Because Buzzwole devours that shit. Great Tusk, switch in all day, Kabalion, easy, like way more defensive options than special defense options. So they're more likely to eat physical stuff. And there are some mons, like Great Tusk, Kabalion, that can be Chestnut, can be defensive, and they don't care if they get knocked off. I mean, every mon cares about getting knocked off, but they can still function without their item. If you have, say, a Z crystal or some kind of sweeping item, then you can switch on a knockoff if you can tank the damage. But there are some sweepers for fighting. I know I kind of labeled them as wall breakers rather than, kind of focused on that than sweeping. But there are sweeping options. Obviously, Iron Valiant. A lot of sweeping sometimes isn't really setup sweeping. It's more of just Choice Scarf clicking close combat until they die. But Komodo can sweep. Howlucha can absolutely sweep. They don't have a way of boosting their speed a lot of the times, which they do typically have decent, good speed, I should say. Sometimes, if they have elite speed, as you see, they're kind of just in Ubers. If we sort by speed, it's just basically all Ubers and OU. Because fast fighting types that have sweep potential are nasty, and a lot of these that are still legal don't have options to boost their speed. So while they can be sweepers, whether by Choice Scarf or just being fast enough, a lot of that's been banned to Ubers and other stuff. But since we play in a draft league with Ubers, that is worth mentioning. So yeah. Alright, quick water break and we're back to rushing through this. So, electric types cannot be T-waved. They can still be paralyzed by Body Slam and Stun Spore, but they cannot be Thunder Waved. They also get Electric Terrain, which is a 50% damage boost to electric moves, and grounded Pokemon cannot be slept. So if you are a flying type and you get spored, you will fall asleep. If you are on the ground and you get spored, you will not fall asleep. This also means you can't rest. So the Rest Talk Pink Pigus set I was running against Pig and Gavin would not work in electric terrain because I can't rest. So there's that. Also, I don't know why I didn't put this on here, because it's literally the most important new mechanic, is it activates our new Gen 9 mechanic for all of the Iron Pokemon, Quark Drive. That is gigantic. As you know, Protosynthesis, ridiculous. Quark Drive, just as equally ridiculous. So all these Pokemon are going to be getting massive buffs due to Quark Drive, and also allows them to mesh with our electric users, like Coco. They're going to load in with Electric Surge Terrain Extender and cause problems. So, general trends, a lot of electric mons are really fast, and this is kind of funny, because when I type in electric and I go to speed, it's like, wow, yeah, a lot of elite speed users here. And then you look down the side and you realize that they're all RU except Coco, Arceus Electric, and Thundy. That being said, there's still some pretty good mons here. Mega Manectric can be pretty good. Zorora just got nerfed to RU literally like a couple days ago, I believe. Also, Regieleki has fallen from grace and was Ubers and is now down to RU. So he's been figured out. And a lot of these mons are sacrificing defense to be fast and are kind of making themselves glass cannons. But the other trend is their high special attack, and a lot of this is because they have better special attack moves as well. If you look up our boy Tapu Koko, his attack is better than his special attack, and yet most of the time he's going to be a special attacker. In terms of physical moves, Electric was really down bad until Gen 9 when they got Supercell Slam. So Supercell Slam finally gave them a physical electric move that's on a lot more Pokemon that can be used. But if we want to build physical Koko here, we have Thunder Punch and we have Wild Charge. And that's basically it. So we don't want recoil on our terrain setter. That's not really ideal. And Thunder Punch is, as you know, 75 power is really not great. That's more of a coverage move. So that leaves us with T-Bolt and Volt Switch. There's also Discharge if you're a defensive mon fishing for a Paralyze. And there's also Thunder if you have a Rain team going on. So the moves of electric types definitely favor themselves in more of a special attack way. So even though there's a mon like Koko, where you have this going on, where your attack is 20 higher than your special attack, sometimes the moves and move pool is so putrid for physical attackers, you're just going special attack anyways. This has, as I said, started to change, and within Electric itself, we are getting better physical Electric mons. As you see in Gen 9, they added we have 2 new ones in the top 3 with Iron Hands and Iron Thorns. So this is something Game Freak is aware of and are actively like moving towards it. But as we know, Game Freak works, in centuries rather than in years. So we're slowly drifting there. But these 2 plus Supercell Slam, huge buff to Electric physically in Gen 9. If this was 5 years ago, I would be like, this type can't physical attack, it sucks, whatever. That has changed. We're now on the board. We're now functioning. Back in my day, when Zeraora came out, and people saw the 112 attack and Plasma Fists, this was the most hyped up Pokemon I think I've ever seen when this thing was announced, in terms of the competitive fan base. It was generational. People were really hoping it was going to be electric and fighting so it could get stab CC, but that didn't happen. Because back in my day, in Gen 7 Mono, electric type could not kill Blissey. Because Blissey, well, it was Chansey back in my day, not Blissey. But Blissey would just do this, and electric type would really struggle to kill it because you have to hit it defensively, and they just couldn't. It just really wasn't an option, and they had to go down to like a Lowling Golem and stuff. But now, with Iron Hands, Iron Thorns, Pawmont, whole new repertoire, Supercell Slam, that's not really a problem anymore, and Blissey can get blown up by people that do have electric typing in their name. So, a miracle that Game Freak has actually done something. And the other thing with electric is it's neutral on steel, and it's super effective against water and flying. Gigantic, as you would imagine. It's neutral against grass itself and dragon. So this is another place where grass is kind of coming in to save the day, where water and steel can't. This is also ground immunes it, which is another reason why ground is good defensively. We just talked about that. So it is a very good type for sweeping because it has a bunch of super effectives and it has a bunch of just neutral matchups. But you can't sweep off pure electric. You're going to have something else there for ground type, grass type, and a lot of the times the answer for that is ice. So it's kind of, it's not really a meme, it's kind of just a statistic. But electric ice will probably never see a fast or good mon with this type combination. Because electric and ice, if duoed together offensively, basically sweeps like everything in the game. Or at least from a type chart standpoint, electric and ice clean like almost everything. If we just look at electric, where electric fails, i.e. grass, ice is super effective. Where ice fails for water, electric super effective. And then here they're covered both the neutrals, neutral covered, where ground is immune to electric, it's weak to ice. And then neutral matchups, where electric is resisted by dragon, ice is super effective. And electric can also hit steel, where ice can't. So basically, if you have electric and ice, you are able to hit almost every single Pokemon ever created neutrally. Abilities aside. So the closest we've ever seen to like a good electric ice duo was KB, Kyurem Black, because his whole thing is Fusion Bolt or I thought there was a different one. Never mind. I guess it's Fusion Bolt. I don't know what I'm thinking of. I'm thinking there's another electric move that's similar to this. Whatever. Anyways, we get Fusion Bolt and also has a 170 attack. And a lot of times you can build it however you want. The problem is that it only ever had 95 speed. So mostly what you would end up doing is something like this, where you would have Fusion Bolt physically off of your attack, and then you would have Ice Beam or Freeze Dry, and then typically like a Dragon move. So this was the closest we ever got to seeing that in action. And this was actually legal in Monotype back in the day. And it was OU back in the day, and it was fine because it couldn't boost its speed. And then Game Freak comes in Gen 9 and gives it access to Dragon Dance, as well as Scale Shot and Icicle Spear, and created Loaded Dice, and just completely broke the game. This mon is now ridiculous. You don't have to run a mixed set anymore, really, because of Icicle Spear and Loaded Dice. You can just do this and you have Dragon Dance. So doing the cool, like, mixed thing, like, best time combination, cool. They took that, they massacred my boy, and created this absolute monster and abomination. You can also run Electric Terra type, which I believe is what they do in Ubers. And I don't know much about Ubers, but I'm pretty sure this is like very good mon in the Ubers tier. So it went from viable and Monotype in OU to like upwards of Ubers. As in never ever touching KDL as long as my fucking heart beats inside my chest. So if you were hoping to do something with this, I'm sorry. Game Freak ruined it for all of us. And yeah, so Electric is a good sweeping type because it has a lot of neutral matchups. And if you have another type, that is either ice or not ice, that can help out. As in, like water or just fairy even, kind of Tapu Koko style. Fairy hits all of this neutrally and dragon super effectively. So you're definitely using your secondary typing when it comes to being electric type. But it creates a good sweeping type. Defensively, the only weakness is ground. So right there, that's great. The problem is you only resist yourself, flying, and steel, which we know no one's really using steel offensively. Electric is yourself, and offensive flying moves don't exist. So what are we doing defensively? We're kind of relying on our abilities, kind of like fire, and being situational as hell. So Raging Bolt is thick with 125 HP, can run Assault Vest, can be defensive build if you really want to. Zapdos, same thing as Moltres, where you can make him defensive and fish for static paras, or you can make him special defensive with Discharge and fish for paras that way. In terms of other electric defensive mons, we have the Rotoms. Rotom Wash is the main one. They're very good because of Nat Dex, because we play in Nat Dex for KDL. You're going to have access to Defog and a bunch of other stuff they took away from him, because Gen 9 and Gen 8 are booty. Iron Hands is 154 HP, so good luck one-shotting him. But when it comes to, like, defensive walls, as in, like, mons that are going to sit in front of you and consistently stuff you throughout the game, they really don't exist. Zapdos is kind of your only option because it gets Roost, and, I mean, 90 HP, 90 special defense, or 85 defense is not unbreakable, you know? This mon can get blasted and removed. So when it comes to defensive options, the type, like, requirements there, Game Freak just hasn't given it to us. So, yeah, that's kind of it for electric. Here's a quick one we can knock out. Ghost. Ghost has 2 immunities, as in ghost types are immune to fighting and normal, which is cool. And Curse halves their HP and inflicts Curse instead of raising their attack and defense and lowering their speed. Now, ghost types are really unique because they tend to have low HP, and I mean really low HP. They tend to be glass cannons if this game ever created any. Yes, looking at this, there are more, and a lot of these are newer mons that are kind of becoming bulkier. But if we look at kind of the relevant ones, we are like 80 and below for a lot of them. And some of the defensive mons of this type have very low HP, but very high defense and special defense. So, Duo Blade, Corsola. Corsola was 60 HP, 100 defense, 100 special defense. Cofagrigus, 58 HP, 145 defense, 105 special defense. Same with Reuniclus. Mega Sab, 50 HP, but super high defense and special defense. Why Ghost Mons are built like this, I don't know. They just are. I'm assuming there's some lore where it's like, oh, they're a ghost, they're already dead. I don't know. But that's kind of the trend with it. Before Poltergeist came out, Ghost sucked offensively. Without Poltergeist, we're looking at, like, Shadow Claw for a physical move. Horrible. The only relevant physical Ghost Mons that I can think of off the top of my head these days are Poltergeist and Shadow Sneak for priority. Yes, Phantom Force exists. Yes, Shadow Claw exists, but they are really just not ideal. Shadow Punch also not really going to be used. Last Respects is banned, typically, and Shadow Fist is cool, but I believe the only people who get that are Annihilate, and it's not Shadow Fist, whatever fucking fist it's called, Rage Fist. Yeah, it's just Annihilate and Primate that get Rage Fist. So, in the grand scheme of things, it's Poltergeist, it's Shadow Sneak, and that's it. Even going to ghost types, like this has the Fist, Dragapult has suffered from this its whole career. It has to use Phantom Force if it wants to use it physically. Garatina is the same thing. Marshadow is also relying on like Poltergeist and stuff, but it gets Spectral Thief for stealing of the stuff. So some of the physical attackers, i.e. Marshadow, Annihilate, have unique moves, but other than that, that's it. And special attack, because these are typically special attack mons, as we see with the just huge special attack stat, kind of the opposite of fighting, we have a new problem. And that is we have Shadow Ball for special attack and nothing else. And Shadow Ball is only 80 power. So while that's nice, it's not really using this gigantic special attack stat that all these ghost types have. So, and if you're wondering, oh, use something else. Well, there is nothing else. It's just Shadow Ball. And Moongeist Beam is for Lunala. And Bitter Malice is for the Hisuian shapeshifting thing, but that has even less power than Shadow Ball. So, Ghost type is just one of the weirdest types in the game statistically, because they have this gigantic special attack, but no stab move to use it with. Their HP values are very low, but then for the defensive mons, their defense and special defense will be through the roof. And then for attack, we have Poltergeist, which can fail if we've already knocked off their item or they haven't brought one. And this is kind of something you can do in the draft league. Whenever I'm playing against Bayonet or just whatever, a lot of times you can bring a defensive mon with no item. And Poltergeist bricks, and now they're screwed. If we look at the type chart, 1 resist, 1 immune. Normal immune, dragon resist. So you are hitting everything neutrally, basically. And defensively, 2 immunities. You resist poison and bug. Cool. And then you're super effective against yourself. And then, or you get hit super effectively from yourself, and then dark. So the only thing that's like consistently there holding back this type is dark, and you get destroyed by it. As we talked about with dark, with knockoff, pursuit, and some of the other things that dark has in its arsenal, you can get pursuit trapped and obliterated because you have 60 HP, 60 defense, and you just get O-code by pursuit. If you're a defensive ghost type, they just click knockoff because that's going to obliterate you. You're going to lose your item. You may live, you may not. And if you switch out, you're knocking off someone else's item. So the whole thing with ghost is that if there is no dark type, you're blowing through people. And if ghost is paired with fighting, that's really good. And that's also how you get banned. Because fighting hits normal, which immunes you, and also hits dark super effectively, which destroys you. So that's how you get Marshadow in Ubers. To effectively sweep as a ghost type, you either sit around and wait for the rest of your team to kill the dark type, or a normal type if they happen to have one, but those are kind of less common, or you have something that can also hit dark. Kind of like Sir Your Ledge, where it will happily use its whatever bitter blade or whatever on the normal types and dark types. So a lot of these mons will be either choice specs or choice scarfed because they are pretty quick themselves. So kind of like Gengar, Blacephalon, 2 great choice lock users. Same with Zoroark and Goldengo. And a lot of times you're either sitting around waiting for your counter to be removed so then you can just clean click through. Because once your opponent does not have a dark or normal to deal with ghost, as we see in the type chart, you can click on anything. Normal, dark, gone, you can just click away. Right? Makes great nasty plotters. I mean, when it comes to special attack, there's not like a dragon dance where you can raise your speed and special attack. unfortunately or fortunately for the game. But because of that, a lot of the times we're just either specs or scarfed, and we are just clicking our way through the enemy team with our 80 power Shadow Ball move. And defensively, we have some options. A lot of them are very unique, kind of like Aegislash, Pekarun, Sableye Mega. You know, this is magic bouncing, this is poisoning everything, this is stance switching, lowering attack. Just as the other offensive types we talked about today, the defensive options are pretty unique in their own ways, and there's not like a general trend. The general trend for defensive mons like Dusknoir is they get Will-O-Wisp, which is pretty good, but some of them do have decent attacks, some don't, so sometimes you're using Nightshade as your offensive option, which just does 100 damage. But mons like Dusknoir can be pretty useful if you give it Poltergeist, Will-O-Wisp. We got some Destiny Bond action going on that we can do. We have Hex. I forgot to talk about Hex. Hex can be good, better than Shadow Ball if you're running, Toxic Spikes or whatever, but you really have to build around that. You also have Shadow Sneak, and you can have some defensive options, but like I said, with Electric, there's really not any walls that are going to sit in front of you the whole game and regen and stuff. That's kind of limited to just this small handful that we have here and the Ubers. And that is it for Ghost, really. Just remove what is blocking you and then click away. And it's kind of the same thing, defensively when we're talking about, Sableye and Aegislash and Duo Blade and stuff, is because it doesn't have a lot of weaknesses either. If you eliminate Dark and other ghost types, they can start to just sit in front of you. And if you don't have a wall breaker, you can really struggle to kill them. So Ghost, very unique type, very simple type as well. It's the next day. We're back at it with Ice. So Ice gets Snow, and yes, Snow, not Hail. As of Gen 9, it was officially changed to Snow, which now gives you a 50% defense boost, kind of like how Sandstorm gives Rock a 50% special defense boost. Snow now does that with defense for Ice types only, but no longer buffs or buffets you or whatever that word is. I'm sure Gavin will let me hear it for not knowing it. But it no longer hurts you. So it's kind of, not the greatest trade-off. I kind of wish they just gave it defense and still hurt people for not being Ice, because Ice could really use it. But unfortunately, that's not what we got. Blizzard can't miss, which is nice, and Aurora Veil is one of the best moves in the game, and you can only activate it if there is snow. So the problem with Ice is that it only resists itself. It is a complete liability to your team defensively having an Ice type on it. You are quite literally doing nothing, because, as we see, Ice can also be walled by Fire, Water, Ice, and Steel. Steel and Water being kind of the main things there. And while Ice does get, a lot of Ice mons can get Freeze Dry, which is super effective against Water and is Ice type, you're still staying on the board. And as we know, that's not very good offensively to be resisted by Steel. But we're super effective against Dragon, Flying, Ground, and Grass. And that is really good. So the thing with Ice is that because it's a liability defensively, but it's hitting everything really well against Water and Steel, a lot of the times the best Ice users aren't even Ice type. They're just Water types like Greninja slotting an Ice Beam, or a different mon using HP Ice. Hidden Power Ice is one of the most common hidden power types. If you're trying to hit Steel with it, you're going to go HP Fire. But if you have Steel covered and you're looking for coverage, you're probably loading up HP Ice. Ice and Fire are the two most slotted in hidden power types. Now, if we go to trends, for some reason, the special attack on a lot of these ice mons, like, just isn't that good. Especially some of the older ones. If we're going down the list and we're looking at Frostlass, Lapras, Walrein, Articuno, like, these are all under 100. So it suffers a little bit of what Ghost goes through, but it's like the opposite, where Ghost is really high special attack, but not a move to abuse it. This is kind of the opposite, where they have Blizzard, which can activate, 100% snow, and they have Ice Beam. The problem is, for some reason, these special attacks just really are not that high. And I'm not really sure why. Only being like, less than 10 mons that are at 120 or higher is really unfortunate. Especially when you're considering, this one's banned, this one's using a stone, mega stone, so you can't actually really boost that. And then we have Kyurem, which is kind of like, the one ice user in OU. And then slow, uber, and then, your attack's the same. So, I'm not really sure why this is a thing, because ice can really use the boost and some help. And the other problem, when it comes to attack, which, as you can see at this point, there's more physical attackers for ice than special attackers. Problem with ice, physically, is it's missing out on a good ice move a lot of the times. So, this has changed in recent gens with Ice Spinner. But before Ice Spinner came out, you just had Icicle Crash, which is like 85 power and 90% accuracy or something. Yeah. That percent mischance is not ideal, especially for something that's only 85 power. And in recent gens, we've got Ice Spinner to help with that, so we no longer have to worry about missing. We've gotten loaded dice to make Icicle Spear useful. Of course, Ice Shard's still there. But other than that, not all Pokemon can really use a good physical ice move, and that's kind of the problem with like Darmanitan Ice. Is the best he could run is Icicle Crash, and he doesn't even get Ice Spinner. So if you're, a mono ice type and this is your only stab and this is the best you got, it's going to take a lot to make that mon good. Well, and that's what the case is here, because we have 140 attack Guerrilla Tactics. So, yeah, that's kind of what it takes to make physical ice this good. Similar with Chenpao, where we have Sword of Ruin plus 120 attack and also ridiculous speed. So it really shouldn't surprise you to find out that all the ice Ubers are kind of just belligerent in their own ways. And after that, we have 3 Pokemon between Ubers and RU. So as great as ice is offensively, it is just such a liability defensively. It's kind of really hard to like make these mons usable. On top of it, you're weak to rocks, so you have the whole, helpful item or boots conundrum, where if you want to run a Specs or a Light Clay for Aurora Veil or a Salt Vest, whatever, you're going to be getting chunked by rocks, so that's just another liability. And you just kind of start getting the feeling that having an ice type on your team is just more worry than work. And that doesn't even make sense, but you get the point. It's just a fucking liability. If water and steel are dealt with, or you have freeze dry, you can start really popping off, though. That's kind of what you see in Iron Bundle, where he's got like Hydro Pump, Ice Beam, freeze dry, and then flip turn to pivot out. He can really do some damage. Also, he's quick enough to be able to actually take advantage of this. So if ice types are, fast and they have something actually going for them, they can be really good. But unfortunately, a lot of times they just end up being too good. And then all you're left with is, the cellar down here. But I wouldn't sleep on them. In terms of a draft league, there certainly is value here when we're, forced to pick RUs anyways, especially with Alolan Ninetales, being a great support mon, Cloyster being a great sweeper. We saw Sean using that. We saw Kyle using Mega Abomasnow and having, some success with it. I was unsuccessful in using Mamoswine. You guys were using the ice types better than I was. But yeah, that's pretty much it for ice. It's a tough go right now for this type, and Game Freak could not give a flying fuck. So, all right, and for the last type of this series, we finally have Dragon. Now, Dragon's very unique because half the mons are box legendaries and are just complete BST stat sticks. As you can see, the Uber, I have to scroll down to see the end of the Uber list, which really shouldn't surprise you. Now, a lot of that is just due to their base stats being absolutely ridiculous, but there is more to Dragon than just stat sticking. And the answer to that is more stat sticking. So if we look at our Dragon type moves here, the base damage on some of these Dragon type moves is absolutely ridiculous. So Draco Meteor with 130 power, Outrage with 120. Those are going to be your two main wall breaking moves. And then they can also sweep because they have D-Dance, which is one of the best stat boosting moves in the game. And they have D-Claw for, not being locked into Outrage if you don't want to be, if you're trying to sweep. And then they have D-Pulse for not trashing your special attack. So we have Meteor and Outrage for wall breaking. We have Claw and Pulse for sweeping. We have D-Dance for stat boosting. And we have Dragon Tail for defensive mons and Force Out. There are other Dragon moves, i.e. Scale Shot, which can also boost speed, and you can do some really cool stuff with that. But a lot of these other moves, just you're not even considering them. It really just kind of is, unless, you have Fickle Beam or Spatial Rend or some Clanging Steel, some specific mon that uses some specialty Dragon move, you're going to end up using these 6 pretty much 99% of the time. In terms of the type chart, it resists the 4 starter types: fire, water, grass, electric, which defensively brings some good value to your team. Now, if you are an offensive Dragon type and you're, say you're like a Dragonite or something, you probably don't want to risk the burn of fire. Water types could be carrying Ice Beam. You don't want to miss the para on an electric move, or risk the para on an electric move. And then grass gets stuffed by everything else in the game. So it kind of have to be careful, because while Dragon types can switch in on a lot of this, you do run the risk of either getting predicted or getting hacked by a 10% burn chance or 10% para. So there is that to consider. On the other side of the ball, defensively, Dragon types never really used to have good defensive options, at least legal ones, until sort of recently, where we're starting to see things like Raging Bolt with a ton of HP. Garchomp, by the way, was the best defensive Pokemon in Dragon Mono back in my day. Komo can be defensive if you need it to be. Goodra Hisui was a gigantic addition to the special defense side of things, because naturally dragons they have ridiculous stats. Their one kind of Achilles heel is that special defense and getting ice beamed. That is kind of the quintessential weak point of them. We're seeing Archelodon, which is another defensive type, and that's cool. And then, just Dragalge and just some other things, but nothing really too crazy down here in RU. Cyclozar, we're starting to see support mons for them. So it is coming around. Does Dragon really need prolific defensive options? No. I think they have plenty enough already. But Game Freak loves Dragon, the kids love Dragon, everyone loves Dragon. That's why there's 47 dragons and Uber types, because they're just always broken because people love them. So we are super effective against ourselves. And we're also weak to ice and fairy. We've kind of already just gone over that. There's really not much more to say about that. Steel can bail dragon out of all three of these greatly bail them out. Because steel is also super effective against ice and fairy. So they're pretty easy to bail out. And the only thing that resists them is steel, and then fairy's immune. Other than that, not a damn resist on the board. But we're only super effective against ourselves. So we've been down this road before. It's a great sweeper type. It's a great wall breaking type. If steel and fairy are not present, or there's only like one of them, because these mons are so high powered, we're kind of getting into the fighting territory where you can just outrage a steel type, and if they're chipped down or whatever, you can end up 2-hit KOing them on switch in. So this type can do literally everything. The door is wide open for dragon. If you are a dragon type and you have some way of hitting steel, you're going to be making money. It's going to be a good mon. Most notably Earthquake. So D-Knight gets Earthquake, Garchomp gets Earthquake, Kyurem gets EP, Latios gets basically every move in the goddamn game. I don't really know what to say. You're a stat stick that hits everything, and you're only scared of steel and fairy. So, yeah, that's really it. And you have, ways to get in, too, because you're resisting for pretty common types that you're going to see, especially for 3 types that are good offensively, being fire, water, and electric. So you're going to have plenty of opportunities to get in. And whether you want to de-dance and sweep, or, choice band, choice specs, wall break, that's up to you. But, yeah, all you fear is steel and ice beam. So, yeah. That's going to finally conclude the series. I can finally move on and talk about something that people care about. So, just took a sip of the root beer. Cheers, fellas. After this, I'm probably going to start talking about roles, because I think the biggest problem people are having is team building. And to get to team building, we have to talk about, roles and what you are building and what all of this means. So I think that's what we're going to address next. But if you're someone who's watched the whole type series, hopefully you learned something, and we'll get to the juicy stuff next. So, thanks, fellas.